Hey, everybody, happy Monday. You know what that means? It is time to start your week off with some news surrounding the NFL and the Cincinnati Bengals. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Cincy Jungles podcast channel. Thanks for joining us. I am Anthony Cosenza, and we're going to get started with some news and notes around the league with the Cincinnati Bengals, especially now that training camp is just around the corner. Training camp is here. So we'll get to that. I'm going to share some articles with you based around the Cincinnati Bengals. A lot of them will come from a Bengals news post that's on cincyjungle.com, but others, I've got some others from NFL.com. I've got some others from just Twitter and some other sources. So we'll kind of cycle through those. And I appreciate you guys joining us on your Monday. I know it's a little later than we usually have taken the other past couple of Mondays for the news, but hey, we're here. It's Monday. We're gonna come at you here again. I'm Anthony Cosenza with cincyjungle.com. You can get this podcast, the Orange and Black Insider, on any number of audio platforms: iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, the Megaphone platform. All of our stuff is on cincyjungle.com, and we are part of a big slate of shows: Matt Minnick's Chalk Talk, Orange is the New Black by Ace and Zim, and D&H Sports with Daddio and Hoji, all bringing you different kinds of Bengals coverage and getting your podcast needs met there. I will have, once at the end of this show, I'm going to tease you a little bit here. At the end of this little show here, again, I'll be here for about 15 or so minutes, but at the end of this episode here, I'm going to have a big announcement. So don't let me leave without telling you an announcement for our show that'll be coming up this week. So excited to share that with you all in just a few minutes. All right, so let's start the news and notes. The biggest news, I think, right now, unfortunately, one of the and here's the post here that is of today. That's kind of a news dump here, for a lack of better words. There are a couple of different. I guess I hate to start off on a negative note, but the Bengals did make a couple of moves with some undrafted college free agents they picked up this year. The first is, and you can see at the top of the list here, the Bengals waive Isaiah Swann. He was a defensive back out of Dartmouth. I think he holds the school record for interceptions in his career, as well as pick sixes. So he was an interesting player, to say the least. But the Bengals, as you know now, because of the COVID crisis and just the way the league's trending, we talked about it on last week's show. The NFL rosters need to be cut to 80 to start training camp. The Bengals were at 84. So they're starting to kind of make some moves here. Isaiah Swann was the first to go, unfortunately, so he is no longer with the team. And then, as you see down here, and there's a full article on cincyjungle.com about this, Kendall Futrell, a defensive end who was added this offseason, had a really good year as a senior last year. I think he had like 11 sacks, and very active player. He's kind of one of those tweener guys. He's about 225, 230 pounds. Technically was an edge rusher in college, but you would think, just because of the size and what the league and what the Bengals need, he was probably going to be, a hybrid line, play in space a little bit, or they were going to try and groom him for that. It would have been interesting to see how he would have fared in all of that. But basically, there is a new reserve COVID-19 list. So somehow, and this is a very fluid list and a fluid situation here. So stick with me on this real quick. Kendall Futrell has either contracted COVID-19 himself, or has been in contact with someone, in all likelihood, has been exposed to someone who has had a positive test. So then the Bengals put him on this reserve list, this COVID-19 specific list. And, he's kind of, I think at that point, he probably will be shelved for at least the foreseeable future. I don't know if it's kind of that quarantine period of about 2 weeks or so. It could be for the entire year, just to be safe, so he's not around other players and coaches. But he has been placed on this list now, and the Cincinnati Bengals are not going to be able to see what he can do, at least not for the first part of training camp. Now, what's interesting about this the team doesn't necessarily have to extrapolate as to why they placed a player on this list. They don't have to give a public reason, whether it's he tested positive, he was around someone who was positive and needs to be in quarantine, or if this is just kind of because of the decreased roster lists and everything. I don't know if teams are going to start kind of using this as kind of a way to stash some players. You've seen teams maybe at times, I don't want to say make up injuries to other players, but that are, intriguing undrafted free agents who showed promise in the preseason, and then they IR them randomly. And you didn't really realize they were that injured. And so they do that as a way to kind of hang on to that player. I don't know that teams are going to be doing this. There are some theories floating around that this reserve COVID-19 list could be used for something in that regard. We don't know, but we're giving the Bengals and 5 other teams, there were 6 players total who tested positive or had some sort of exposure to it or what have you. But six different players on different teams apparently are on this list now. So, that's what's going on, at least in the futures of 2 recent undrafted rookie free agents on the Bengals team. Right below it, and I'm going to share a different screen for you. I'm going to give a pat on the back to our good buddy James Rapine over at Sports Illustrated, who has been on this show, and he is part of the dynamic duo on the Locked On Bengals podcast with Jake Liskow. He and his army that he has built over at allbengals.com. They have a nice article kind of talking about Joe Mixon here, and it's a good breakdown of what Dave Lapham said in terms of re-signing Joe Mixon to a long-term contract. So if you see here, that's kind of the talking point. We've talked about that on our show quite a bit. Now that the AJ Green didn't get his extension, is Joe Mixon going to get his? My co-host John Sheeran is a little lukewarm on Joe Mixon getting a long-term contract, as are a lot of people, because of the devaluation of the running back position. But a lot of others realize that Joe Mixon may be the outlier and maybe a special case and is deserving of a big extension, whatever that may look like. A lot of people think it could be something that very similarly resembles the one that Derrick Henry got, which was a 4-year, I believe, $50 million contract. Yeah, right here, 4-year, $50 million. So, they think that may be kind of the benchmark here for a guy like Joe Mixon. Now, Lapham on the Bengals Booth podcast. You've got all these great Bengals podcasts, our show hopefully included. You feel that way, but a lot of good Bengals podcasts out there, and it's a really exciting year. And given what's going on in society with a lot of things locked down and whatnot, it's a good opportunity for you to check out a lot of good Bengals podcasts. And if you're new to our show, thanks. But at any rate, Lapham was on with the Bengals Booth podcast with Dan Horde, and you can see the quote here. Yes, I would give Joe Mixon a similar deal, quote. Obviously that being the similar deal being Henry's deal, huge factor in the second half of the season. Lapham says without AJ Green not around and having the passing attack, opposing defenses knew that Joe Mixon was going to get the football. He's a lightning rod for the rest of the team. Guys gravitate toward him. They feed off his energy. He provides a lot of energy. He's a hell of a player. I would ink him if I could, is what Dave Lapham said about the Bengals potentially giving Joe Mixon a long-term contract. So that is some pretty eye-opening news. I mean, I guess you would think Dave Lapham being a voice of the Bengals, of course, he's going to support one of their star players openly staying with the Bengals. But, this is kind of a point of debate. Do you pay guys like this, especially as they get more wear and tear on the tires, so to speak? Do you pay these guys the big money, $11+ million a year? Mixon has proven he can be productive behind a subpar offensive line. He has improved as a receiver, which he was always pretty good at anyway. And he's still working on being a better pass protector. So, he's done a lot. And, obviously, as he came into the league, there were a lot of questions in terms of the character things that followed him. And since he's basically been a choir boy since being with the Bengals and has become a team leader. So, he's earned a big deal. It's just whether it's with the Bengals or not that, that's to be determined. So let's keep moving on here. I've got one other tweet to share from Tyler Dragon, who is the beat writer for the Cincinnati Enquirer, one of the great guys there. So let me share this with you here. Just a little fun tidbit here. Joe Burrow has gotten familiar with at least one Bengals wide receiver this offseason, and according to a source, Burrow and John Ross have trained together multiple times since the draft. Oddly enough, for those of you who do not know, I reside in Southern California, and a lot of these guys were actually, Burrow and Ross included, were working out very close to my home. And I think a couple of times they had met up with Jordan Palmer. And Jordan Palmer lives down in my neck of the woods as well. So he's been doing a lot of things, if you're familiar with Southern California, in like the Laguna Niguel, Dana Point, San Juan Capistrano area is kind of where a lot of these camps and stuff have been taking place. Palmer has also had to be kind of creative with this camp that he does, this elite camp he does for young quarterbacks. It started off as one that was basically just for college prospects entering the NFL, and now it has turned into middle school and high school kids that are looking to get top cornerback training, and Palmer provides that in the Southern California area. So I think, and a lot of times before the draft, I know for a fact Burrow and Ross were among Jordan Love and others were working out with Jordan Palmer. So I think that's where some of this practice time together has stemmed from, as well as I think Burrow and T. Higgins were also working out together with Jordan Palmer and their crew that he's amassed there. So, there's a little bit of rapport that was built there as well. So that's kind of an interesting little tidbit of information there on that front. We're going to swap to a little bit of more NFL driven news in just a second. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza. I'll be here a few more minutes with the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. Thanks for tuning in, whether it's via our YouTube channel, the Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that. I think it's this side. There's a little button over here. You can click that and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our stuff also streams on Facebook, on the Cincy Jungle Facebook channel. So go ahead and like that and give that a follow to be alerted as to when we take the air live. And all of our stuff, if you're unable to join us live, all of our stuff, at least most of our stuff, whether it's from our show, whether it's from D&H Sports, Orange is the New Black from Mason Zim, or Matt Minnick's Chalk Talk, all of the audio is available wherever you like to listen to your podcast. So thank you for your support. We'll get to a big announcement at the end of the show in just a few minutes. I do want to say this, Greg Morse, I just want to point this out. I know this isn't like a listener question show. We usually do that at the end of the week, but he just said, really haven't had a chance to watch our show for a while, been overseas in the Army, miss watching Stay Strong and Who Day. Thanks for your service, Greg. Just want to give you a little shout out, man. And it's really cool that you're watching from so far away from where I'm broadcasting. So as many of you echoed in the chat there, thank you for your service, and appreciate you listening, as we appreciate all of you who listen to our program. This is one that I saw a question, I got a question earlier today on Twitter from one of our listeners, and I think some people said it in the chat here as well, talking obviously about what came out over the news wire today on what's going on in the MLB. So obviously the MLB is they started back up. They've played a handful of games. Each team has played a handful of games, and now all of a sudden you're getting wind of games being canceled because players have tested positive, namely the Miami Marlins. A lot of players tested positive with them. So now now there's this whole, how do we do this? Is the season going to continue and all of that? I saw some quotes in our chat saying, there probably isn't going to be a football season. I still don't believe that. I do think there is going to be a football season, and I think that for now, what that's going to look like, whether it gets cut short, I don't know, but I think that they are going to try to play this season. I think football is a very, very profitable sport, and that may not be the most moral stance with it, but I think there's a lot of money to be lost by not playing this sport specifically. So I think they're going to try and find ways to make that happen. Unfortunately, now you've seen, the NBA did the bubble thing. MLB is still, their guys are traveling around to different stadiums, and they've got no fans. They do like the virtual fans, and they pump in noise and all that kind of stuff. They're playing in empty stadiums, but these guys are testing positive for it. Now, whatever you want to think about the testing and what that means, there's a lot of different explanations for that, and I get that, but I mean, it is what it is. So, and it's not a good thing. So now there's an article on NFL.com by Judy Batista. I recommend you looking at it. We did talk about this a bit on our program in terms of what things will be looking like for training camp, whether it's the Cincinnati Bengals or the NFL. So this is talking about, you see here, training camp starts basically by tomorrow for all teams, and this talks, I think it's about how much will players be tested. I think it said starting Tuesday and continuing through July 31st, players will show up, take tests on back-to-back days, then go home and self-isolate for 24 hours before returning on day 4 to take another test. And only after that third one is negative can they proceed to getting their equipment and physicals on August 1st and August 2nd. So they're going to be tested quite a bit. They're going to be very careful with this. I don't know to be quite honest with you, I'm a little ignorant on exactly how the MLB and NBA are doing that, because I don't cover those sports as regularly as the NFL. But I don't know that they're doing this same precaution. They may be doing kind of the temperature scans and whatnot. So the other thing, going back to what I said earlier about, how I think the NFL is going to continue in 2020. It's not just the financial aspect with it. I guess in both a unfortunate and fortunate way, the NFL has now a lot of hindsight to look at in terms of the mistakes the MLB has made, how successful potentially a bubble situation like the NBA. They can learn from other leagues that have started up already. So they have a little more time to kind of maneuver through things and ensure player safety, ensure fan safety, that sort of thing. It sounds like obviously fan attendance there's going to be no preseason. We know that. Sounds like the Bengals put out an announcement today reminding everybody that there's not going to be a preseason. Fans won't be permitted to show up to training camp practices or anything like that. So that kind of takes a little bit of the luster, the fan luster out of, the excitement out of this new look Bengals team specifically, but it's going to be different. It's going to be different. And obviously the amount of fan attendance in regular season games will be greatly decreased, and there's going to be social distancing and all of that. But it really, really interesting and informative article by Judy Batista on NFL.com. I really recommend you looking at it. Talks about how many practices really, there's no specific conditioning tests during the first week and a half or so of August. It's 60 minutes in the weight room and 60 minutes on field conditioning. There's walkthroughs, and it does seem to be quite a bit lighter, especially if you remember back to the Marvin Lewis days of the Oklahoma drill and all that kind of stuff. That's not really taking place, especially not in the COVID situation. So from August 17th through September 6th, 14 padded practices will be allowed. So a lot of them will be, walkthroughs and, shorts and helmets type of thing. So not a lot of physical activity, but that's kind of to be expected with everything. And, on the good news, aside from people potentially not getting sick, the good news with it is, a lot of times you have a lot of unnecessary injuries in training camps. And that seems to hopefully be lessened with less padded practices and whatnot. So, that's something that is to be expected. And we've previewed a little bit about it on our other shows about what to look for at training camp and how that's going to look into the season. Lastly, before we get to our big announcement and before I get out of here, just a little news on the Washington front. They've changed their name, I guess, to the Washington Football Club. They are no longer the Redskins. So they've done that, and they haven't come up with a name or a mascot anymore. So, or as of yet. So they are leaving their previous moniker in the past, and they are moving forward. And until they have decided upon a mascot, a name, and all of that, they are basically kind of going to be very generic in their wording, even on their uniforms for the time being. So that's it's an interesting situation there, and it's I guess to be expected. I mean, it's something that it's a change that's been talked about for a long time. So it's finally occurring. It seems as if they'll be keeping their same colors from what I can tell, but they're going to be called, at least for now, I think the Washington Football Club or something to that effect. And that'll be noted on their jerseys, helmets, etc. going forward until they come up with a name there. So I feel like I've done these, I think 3 weeks straight now. We started it about 3 weeks ago, and I thought I would start the first news episode with a new name for that team, and it still has kind of dragged on. But I guess better to be deliberate and use a lot of consideration in that decision, especially with the backlash they've received. So I think it's good that they're taking their time and doing that. So we're gonna get on out of here. That's gonna be. You can go to cincyjungle.com and check out the news links there. A lot of different outlets covering the Cincinnati Bengals. They are an in vogue team right now, so check that out. Check out some NFL news, whether it's on Twitter, NFL.com, etc. The big announcement I want to tell everybody shortly before, and this is a little bit of a reason why we came on the air a little late, because I was conversing with someone. We're going to have Takeo Spikes on the show Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. So a special interview with Takeo Spikes coming on the program. He's going to be joining us via phone. He's got a new podcast on the Believe Network. If you remember, we had Eric Davis, former Super Bowl champ with the Niners, join us last year when the Bengals were taking on the 49ers in early in the season there. We had Eric Davis on, part of the Believe Network, and now Takeo Spikes is going to be joining us. So very interested in talking with him and very excited about that. We will be talking with him about his career with the Bengals, the current state of the Cincinnati Bengals, the landscape of the NFL, and then, of course, his new podcast with the Believe Network. So join us Thursday morning. We were not going to do listener questions live this Friday because we're doing the Takeo Spikes interview. So we have the Monday news jump that we're bringing you right now. We've got our standard longer Wednesday show. John Sheeran and I will be doing that on Wednesday night. And then right after Thursday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, we're going to be set to be joined by Takeo Spikes on the program. So we hope you can join us live for that or catch the interview on all of the platforms that I mentioned earlier: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, iHeartRadio. It'll be on Cincy Jungle as a standalone post. It'll be on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. It'll be on our YouTube channel. So get it how you can and join us for the Takeo Spikes interview. We're very excited about that. So thanks for tuning in. We wanted to get you that last piece of news before we get on out of here. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you